every once in a while I end up in a bit of a rodeo, but nothing that's ever, too bad. It's more interesting. And what I like is when I come back and look at my map, I can say, wow, I've been all there. So maybe some of there was getting lost or redirection, but it really understands how the land is formed and what that looks like.
Welcome to the Wilderness Wavelength Podcast. Welcome to it. This is another episode of the Wilderness Wavelength Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Exciting episode, this one. We're talking Passport to the Peaks. We'll find out about it. It's based at a Grande Cache, but we have some guests that'll know a lot about this. We welcome back our good friend Scott Sunderwald. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Yeah, good to be here.
Terra Rasmussen, she is like I want to say like our insider into the Wilmore. Like she was on, we talked about the Wilmore and that was like one of the most loved episodes so far in the podcast, by the way, too. So welcome back to the show.
All right, good to be here.
And Renee Fehr from the Passport to the Peaks program in Grande Cache. Renee, thanks for coming on with us today.
Thank you.
Renee, can you just, before we dive into the whole thing, can you just give us like the background to the Passport to the Peaks and what's how did the program start and what it's about?
Sure. In 2001, one of our local doctors, Keith Darcell, he was the one who started with the program. He had a lot of friends, a lot of people in town support him. Thanks to him and some of the things they did, probably without permits, and we have things that we wouldn't have today. And I say that with respect. When I got involved in it about 5 years ago, when Keith had moved, we had taken over as a society and created the committee. And I realized how many things he did for us that would be really quite impossible, like flying helicopters into the park and putting, big cables on mountains. So every time that we went to do something, I had a lot more respect and a lot more appreciation for all the work that he did, because I think doing those things now with all the steps, I don't think it would have come to fruition. So I feel quite grateful that we have this program and that we can maintain it.
So what is the program?
So the program is basically it's 21 mountains. It's been designed in levels of bronze, a silver, and gold, and it kind of gets harder as you go, and that's where the colors go. So bronze, for the most part, easy day trips, really well marked. Silver gets up to a little bit harder. You might want to start navigating, lack of service. You would maybe cross some water, maybe have to stay overnight. Then it gets to the gold, expecting more navigation, expecting more water crossings, a little bit more challenging. The claim to fame is that on the top of the 21 peaks, you can see the actual site of Grande Cache. So you get to the mountain and you look for town. And that's super cool, because there's other mountains in our area that would also be really great to hike and climb, and are great to hike and climb, but you can't all see the view of the town. So that's what makes it significant.
So is this like the 21 mountains? Are you seeing that, like if you're in town, are you like Grande Cache just surrounded by mountains? Are you able to see each one of these peaks?
Absolutely.
Cool.
What's interesting is it depends on the angle. Like if you go up the south side of Stern, there's a really nice hill. And if you turn, you can see from Hayden Ridge to De Vieber. You can see, quite a big cross section. If you are driving up to the mine, you can see Hamel, you can see Cairn, you can see Volcano. So it really depends on what direction you are. And that's what makes it kind of neat, because as you start to learn the names of the mountains and where they fit with everything around town, it's kind of neat, because some of them have stories, right? So
That's super cool. I love it. Scott, you were saying before that you thought maybe like the 21 wasn't like 21's has expanded, like before it was a smaller, like 6 mountains or something.
Yeah, well, these ladies would know way more about that than I do, but I was shocked to see that it had grown to 21, because I've been in the area for 20 years here, and it certainly didn't start off that big. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was a smaller group, and I guess I'm curious, going back to this doctor, about that vision. Was this sort of something that he foresaw could be a big tourism draw, or something personal for him, friends and family, and it grew? And I guess, to add another question to that, you mentioned the helicopter time. I mean, helicopters are insanely expensive. So did he beg, borrow, and steal helicopter time, or fundraised, or maybe give us a little more history on how this whole thing unfolded?
completely, Scott. So when he started doing these things, he really leaned on the in-kind donation and help. And one of that was, I want to say, oh, what was his name? He was an Australian. But he donated his time and his helicopter time to help with the things. So really, when you look at the inception of it and the original book, inside there's a list of names of people that helped. They volunteered their time. They too liked Grande Cache. They too saw these amazing scenes and sights. And for a lot of people who weren't aware that they were here, it became a really great way to share our town. Now, I don't know if Keith saw it as, hey, we want to make this big, tourism project, or hey, do you know what's here? Because a lot of them I look at, and even when you read the book, a lot of them he did in November, which really baffles me because we don't necessarily do those things because it's really cold. So whether he was doing day trips or him and his buddies were just having a great time, I know there's a program similar in Colorado because I did a little bit of research on that when we took over this program as a board and just, learning about it. And it's kind of got the same thing with the book and the same kind of setup. I did try to contact them for some more information to see similarities. However, I don't know if that was Keith's inspiration. What I do know is he loved the area. What I do know is some of the people that finished this program and volunteered were also part of the Wilmore Wanderers, a set of gentlemen, doctors, teachers that every year would go and take a place and explore. And some of their experiences and stories are quite amazing. Because for me, that's how I got involved in this program.
So are the Wilmore Wanderers still a thing? I heard about them about 10 years ago and I haven't heard anything since. Is that still a existing committee?
A lot of them are older. Some of them have, I think if I'm correct, a couple of them are gold finishers on our program, and a couple of them I think have since passed. But doctors, teachers, all retired. Do they do the same things? No. I think of the one guy that came to the school and started my journey on Passport to the Peaks. He's got bad knees, so he can't do what he used to do. But the places they went, they've got big stories about Nahanni. Sometimes what they do is they come to the seniors lodge and do presentations. A couple of them are really good and they've got PowerPoints and great stories and pictures, and it's amazing. So the miles those men have hiked, amazing.
So this must have started off a lot smaller and then growing up to 21 peaks. Is there a vision to grow it even bigger? Where does it end,
I
I
don't
guess?
I don't think so because there's a couple complications. Like I think when the program started, I actually think all 21 were there, but I think those six, those bronze were in the forefront. So what did people see? The bronze, right? It was easy, it was accessible. I think the other ones, and if you look back at some of Keith's designs, some of the maps I have, like we have a mountain and it's called G6. The reason it was G6 is he had laid those out as G1, G2, G3, G4. He had numbered them. So to work on them in sequence and develop those things. So I think it was always there. I think in the last few years it's gotten really popular. And I think the pandemic was part of that.
Yeah, gets people out. Terra, you just actually you were almost late for the podcast tonight because you were climbing one of these mountains. Um, of the 21, have you done all 21 yet, Terra? Like you're
Oh,
the
no,
mount.
I have three left. I keep getting distracted with other trips.
Oh yeah.
Because once you get into the golds, like Renee said, you're spending more time out there, right? And it's a lot more route finding. So you really have to commit usually 3 to 4 days.
Mm.
That is now climbing onto my lap. To be able to complete them. So, when you have limited time off, you got to kind of waffle between what trips you're going to do. But
Do
I'll
you?
get there.
So is it three golds that you have left then?
I have three golds. Yeah. Oh, no,
Okay.
I have one silver that has
Yeah.
a gold root and two golds. Yeah.
Okay. And then Renee, have you done all 21 then, Renee?
I completed them last year.
Wow, that's amazing.
I,
How many years did it take you to do all 21?
I started hiking with my son, and that would have been about 15 years ago we started. And to be honest, until the last maybe 6 or 7 years, I wasn't too concerned about finishing. In the last few years, then it was like, you know what, I should do this.
Yeah.
My kids grew up and they moved away, and I had more time, and everything changed, right? Like just like Tara said, you've got jobs and kids and projects and limited days and family reunions and birthdays. So it's pick and choose. And in the last few years, I had a little bit more time for myself. I find that's one great thing about the program. It allows people to connect in a different way. So I've met a lot of great people along the trails. I've met a lot of the horse people because you're out there. And like the one year we met one of the bull riders. He was out taking some people hunting. And then every fall we seem to see him on the trail. So it's kind of that camaraderie. And I think that's one of the great parts of the program.
I love it. So you can go to the Grande Cache Visitor Center and they have a book there that you can buy that has a spot where so you can stamp all 21 peaks. Do you know how many people have done all 21?
I do. We have 29 people who've completed in the last 25 years.
Wow.
22 are men and 7 are women.
That is incredibly impressive. And for the listeners here, it's not like I think some people might hear, oh, 21 Peaks, you drive up, there's a parking lot, you walk out the door, and away you go up the mountain. That's not what this is. This is real wilderness, Northern Rockies splendor stuff. So very impressive. And from what I understand, and maybe we can dive into this a bit, the navigation, like you're not going on well-established trails on this stuff. Like what percentages well-marked trails and how much of this is self-navigation?
Well, I think when you come down to the Browns routes, they're pretty straightforward. So I would say there's no navigation. And please, Tara, jump in. When you get to Silver, maybe half of them have pretty decent trails. But what happens is because these trails aren't cleared, so the wind comes. Like a couple of years ago when we saw that big snowfall in June and all those trees fell over. I remember one of the first Silvers I did with Volcano years ago, and it had a trail for sure. But then over time, when no one goes there, a tree falls, you go around, a tree falls and all of a sudden you're in a bunch of willows and you're wondering if this still is the same trail to the top because it doesn't feel like that. So I think that Mother Nature takes a turn on things too, and that we have lots of places with lack of service, so we really need to learn how to navigate.
I think something that people don't really understand going into the program is there's a lot of route finding. And route finding, means being able to look both at your map and at the mountain as you're approaching it and going, okay, what's the way to go at this? So it's really important for people to work their way up through the bronze and then begin at the start of the silvers because they hit two of the silvers, which are Volcano and Karen, and they get minimal bushwhacking and a little bit of route finding, a little bit of compass work. And if you don't kind of troubleshoot your way through those early ones and then build slower, there's a number of groups that have gotten themselves into bad situations because they're just underestimating time, they're underestimating routes. And I think one of the neat things for me, is I guess I've hiked my entire life, is that there's something for everyone. When you get into the golds, it's more of an outline, right? So you get to look, okay, this is the route that these guys took. And then you can go back and you can look at the trip reports and you can see, okay, what have people said about this? And then you can go on the maps and you can go, man, that doesn't look like a route I want to do. I want to go this way. I'm going to try to get to the summit this way. And that's the fun for me in the program is the fact that you get to adjust how you go at it. And just because one person did it this way does not mean it's the best route. I've done some of the routes in the program and I would 100% tell you don't go that way ever. It's so it really you become pretty accomplished not only at researching what you're doing, right? But being able to understand limitations. And it is wilderness. There's rivers, there's serious bushwhacking, depending which way you go. There's scrambles. I've been at a top of the couple of the mountains, and you don't need technical gear. That's one of the things the program says. But I tell you, there's a couple places I did not feel particularly secure. So they are challenging. They're a big deal, and maybe you'll only do the bronze, maybe you'll do the silvers, maybe you'll go on to the golds, right? But there is something for everybody in it.
When you're starting with the bronze, I think that's a great idea. Like start with the bronze and work your way up. When you're starting with the bronze, like what is the easiest mountain? Is there one that you do like you can take your kids on pretty easily?
Ambler's the easiest mountain. I think the most challenging part about Ambler is you drive up the Beaver Dam road. So, it's about 7 kilometers up the Beaver Dam road. Make sure you have a vehicle that can drive up there because often we have the log haul on there. And I think people don't realize that our roads aren't maintained. So, it could be a swamp. Like last year, I snowshoed it in January. I hitched a ride with an outfitter that was going up. He had an Argo. He brought us up because we knew we couldn't get up there with the snow, dropped us off at the bottom of Ambler, and we were waist deep. And then we went and snowshoed the mountain. And well, because it's not a hard mountain, it's beautiful. So we went up to the top, took some pictures, had a sandwich, enjoyed our time. And then what was great is because he argoed from the highway up to the start of Ambler, it was easy walking on the way back in his tracks. But it's thinking about what does it look like to get there? So it's the easiest, yes, but how do we get there? Is it accessible?
Yeah.
I like that you brought up kids because a lot of the people that are doing our bronze are actually families. And I see them up there with their 5-year-olds. I've seen people with carriers and they've got their babies up there. I've carried my daughter up to Ambler actually. And Renee brought up the winter hiking. We have incredible winter hiking on these bronze peaks. So some of them have some avalanche risk, but a lot of them are pretty safe to go up. You always want to make sure you plan for conditions and weather change and make sure you're safe. But compared to a lot of areas I've seen, like we have very friendly mountains to just go and enjoy any season of the year, and it's really worth checking out.
That's a really good point. I mean, we say in scrambling, a mountain that's comfortable in the summer can turn into intense mountaineering in the winter. It can become a completely different experience once you factor in ice and avalanches and all of that. I'd like to go back to navigation for a moment. So, if folks are embarking on this, can they make do with a downloaded paper map and a compass, or should they be getting a GPS or all trails, or what are you advising for navigation?
So Renee and I are going to probably clash on this one. I say don't use all trails. Please, in my opinion, you should never be following somebody's route exactly out there. One thing that I see happen is people kill their phone batteries. And, if you're tracking to the T, you're losing a lot of time too as you're hiking. You should be paying attention to where you're going. I use Keltopo. And so what I'll do is I'll bring up my pin. I know there's, I think Canadian Topo might be the name of it that some people have for their phones. They have the Garmin apps. The reason I don't like all trails is compared to other maps that I've seen that you can get, for instance, on Keltopo, it's not very good maps. It's missing a lot of details, and those details can become really important when you're you're really trying to route find back there. So you should have something to bring up a pin on a good map. You should have some sort of emergency device. You should always make sure somebody knows exactly what your route plan is, where you're going, and you should be able to contact them. And anytime you're doing any kind of route change up there, you should be letting somebody know that you're doing it because it is true wilderness. And I'm on search and rescue, and I can tell you it's like a needle in a haystack. If you don't have a pretty good idea of where you could be, you're in trouble. You're in trouble quickly, and it's going to take at least 24 hours probably for people to get to you. So you got to really plan this stuff.
So, and Tara's right. So I'll use all trails, but what I'll use it for is to record my route. I don't want to copy someone else's route. I want to record my route because I know what I like and I don't. I like the old-fashioned map things, and I grew up hunting and stuff in the bush. So I'm the person who looks for the poplars to walk for the poplars and not through the spruce. I do a lot of things by existing trails. So I've done a lot of scouting. So there's no bad trip. You might not make a peak, but it's always a scouting trip. So I'll do a lot of things by bush stuff because that's how I grew up. So yeah, I'll have a map, but I'm kind of basically a general direction. And then I weed my way up and I might take the same one or not. I've got a friend who's made a comment that there's lots of Renee adventures, but I don't mind being in the bush. I like the hunting and stuff. I like to find the game trails. They've really worked for me in the past. Every once in a while, I end up in a bit of a rodeo, but nothing that's ever, too bad. It's more interesting. And what I like is when I come back and look at my map, I can say, wow, I've been all there. So maybe some of there was getting lost or redirection, but it really understands how the land is formed and what that looks like. I also like to do the safety net where if in doubt, jump in the river and follow the river home. So some of those things, but that's how I was raised. So Tara's probably way better at the navigation than I am.
She brings up a really good point though, is not every time you go for one of these bigger peaks is it going to be successful. I turned around on my first gold 100 meters from the summit. I called it due to conditions. My friend still went up. And I just said, no way, this is not my comfort level. It's not what I want to do. We were completely fogged in. I couldn't see where the cliffs were. I couldn't see anything, you know. And I think being able to know your limitations and your comfort and to make good calls, you can be really close to the summit of something. It doesn't mean you should go up it.
I totally agree with that. Um, I do a lot of rock climbing. I've done a lot of multi-pitch with ropes and scrambles, and what I've always told my kids is be true to yourself. If you get that feeling that you're out of your league, you better listen up. That's when people get in trouble, right? And the route finding's so critical. Like I went on Mount Wilcox in Jasper, very famous mountain, and with my son, we got off route and we went from what was supposed to be a decent scramble to hardcore mountaineering. And if I didn't have gear, I don't think we would have made it down alive. We got off track, and it can happen so quick. Like literally, your proper route could be 30 yards to the left, but you're exposed on something that you shouldn't have gotten on. But it happens, right?
And easily. It happens easily because we
Yeah.
had one of those adventures last summer and it was right upon us before we knew it. We were 10 feet off of our trail. Next thing you know, we were in a canyon and we had two choices, go up, 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 or go down, down, down. So we chose down. Was it the right choice? I don't know. Like everything worked out, but we spent a night on a ledge on a garbage bag. So
What time of year was that?
it would have been August. And you know what was great is what I always look at the forecast. So I knew it
Mhm.
wasn't going to freeze. I knew it wasn't supposed to rain. Now, there's never a guarantee. We're in the mountains. And that's one of the things about being prepared, but we had a pretty good chance. So that helped.
So hypothermia didn't set in. You were able to stay warm enough. And
Well, I want to say I was super lucky where I am. I'm kind of a hot flasher. So the heat part wasn't an issue for me. The other two young girls, I was big spoon. So
Renee, I haven't heard this story.
oh man.
You've been keeping this from me.
Yes, I have.
It's
So do you
interesting.
take emergency sleeping bag or space blankets? What's your kit look like for some of these gold level trips?
Oh man, you know what? I have to be honest. All of my mountains, of all the ones I've done, and I've actually, so a couple of years ago, my brother and I, we looked at the mountains I've done, and I've hiked over 100 mountains, most of them in this
Wow.
area. And for the most part, I was always running or doing some kind of training, and I was always fast enough. I've only ever hiked two mountains partially in the dark because I've already always happened in the daytime. And I think it goes back to what Tara said earlier. Like you can plan, you can prepare, but you don't always know how long it'll take. Like what you said, Scott, you get off route. Well, that takes extra time. So I usually only carry light for a day. I don't necessarily bring everything. I've brought it, not used it. And I think sometimes you get a little bit cheeky in the fact that you think it's going to be okay. And then, like in this situation, we got caught. We got
Mhm.
caught. So, I go back to my dad would always say, you get stuck in the bush and things don't look good, sit under a tree, take a rest, don't be panicked. So I'm a person who'll sit down and take a nap when things, or just, I don't know, just relax and rest and kind of recenter. But his thing was sit down, take a rest. If you have to sleep under a tree, you'll be okay. In the morning, everything looks different because you can see. So from the most part, I've never been caught in the dark. It's only been a couple times. The first time we were caught, we were coming down, it was October, and we didn't have much to go back to our quads. We had quadded to the boundary, so it wasn't very long at all. But what happened with that was we had one person who had prescription sunglasses. Well, it started getting dark and she couldn't see. She was falling a lot. And I look back at that and thought, why did we not plan for that? Even having headlamps, half of us had them, half of us didn't. And then this last time, we just got caught off course. It was just a beast of a mountain. And we got, in a spot that we couldn't get out of right there, and it wasn't the right place to go. Which probably at some point I should just tell you the story.
Well, your dad had wise words there. I've learned from experience, the worst thing you can do is just keep going when you're feeling uneasy, like stop and reassess and let your brain kick in, refocus, and you'll make way better decisions. How about you, Tara? What's a typical day pack look like for you on a gold mountain?
Well, that depends how I'm going at it. I usually carry enough I can always spend the night. And I actually got myself in really bad trouble a couple of years ago because I wasn't that far from getting out. Both of my GPSs went down. One went down first, and the other one mispinned what I was going for. And I've always had a rule for myself. I'm not going to move after dark, and I'm never going to let myself get soaking wet, you know. And I was solo hiking at the time. The whole day had gone flawlessly, and it started to rain, and I was embarrassed, you know. I wanted to get out, and I kept pushing through the rain and through the willow and pushing, and it ended in a search and rescue call because it hit 1 in the morning and I was soaking wet. I was free, you know, I knew where I was basically. Everybody knew where I was, but the problem was that I hadn't stopped. I had all the gear to stop. I had the capabilities, you know, to build a fire. And that's what I actually did. I stopped, I built a fire, I got myself warm, and I had my emergency bivy. I also had an extra emergency blanket, and I can't stress how important that is. You know, you put that under your coat, and dry socks. Oh my goodness. You can put dry socks on and throw a couple of those foot warmers in the bottom of your bivy, and then you crawl in and you just stay right next to that fire. I mean, you're good. I dried myself out. I was warm. I was okay, but it hit a point. I'd broken multiple rules that I said I wouldn't do, and you know, everything worked out fine because I had the right gear. If I hadn't started that fire, if I hadn't had the bivy, if I hadn't had extra warmers, extra food, extra water, I would have been hyperthermic, and it would have been a bad story. Um, Everything was okay, but now what I do is you know, I've gone out a couple times and I've practiced what I carry in my day pack, and I've just made shelters with it, and I've gone in with very limited gear because if you don't practice using that stuff when you're panicking and when you're tired and you're cold and you're in that situation that you really need to utilize it, you're not going to do it. You know, your brain's going to kind of block up on it. You're not going to have that confidence. So, you know, whatever you carry in your day pack, pick an ugly night, you know, stay close, pick a safe spot, but go and use it. Set up, you know, set up your emergency tarp or your bivy. Try sitting under a tree and starting a fire. I know of two groups that have actually been caught out doing gold peaks, and uh, half the group, for one, didn't have any emergency supplies, and they were in bad shape. The other half of the group had to take care of them to their own detriment. You know, people got pretty cold. And then the other group, and I could be wrong, but I think there was at least four people, they couldn't light a fire. They were, you know, that is a bad situation. So, you know, carry fire starter and go in the pouring rain, go and start a fire because
Yeah.
that's what's going to save your life. You know, I can't stress that enough. If I hadn't been able to light my fire that night, if I hadn't recognized myself getting cold, I don't know. It doesn't matter if you're 5 kilometers, 2 kilometers, or 30 kilometers, you're still dead in the morning.
Yeah.
That's it. So,
Yeah, I've watched some of your latest posts where you've camped out under lean-tos and tested that out. That's great to see. And like you said, you want to do that stuff while you're comfortable, while you're close to safety. So when the danger situation happens, you can revert back to your training, right? And it's be like, this isn't so bad. I can spend the night under this tree. I can stay warm, you know?
yeah, if I just stopped, you know, when it got dark and just said, you know, yeah, I only have 5 kilometers to go. It's pouring rain. Let's just make a camp here and go out in the light. That I would have been better off. You know, I was trying to navigate in the dark, which is horrible. You know, it's really bad. And I passed my out twice. I walked right past it. I was relying on GPSs that I hadn't actually used them a lot. I'd always navigated in different ways. And I changed a lot of things after that trip. But the one thing I just drill into people, it's just like, don't move after dark. Have your turnaround point, you know? You make a call that just says it doesn't matter where we are. We just stop, especially if you're off trail. Like it is bad news. And yeah, use your gear.
Well, and I
No,
think the other thing too, Tara, you were by yourself. Like, you know, all of my hikes, I've had someone else, and usually there's someone saying, I think we're done. Last year we went up to G3 and a snowstorm broke out. And I didn't want to go up the straight part. There was another place we could have went that I was more comfortable with, but we picked as a group, we go together, we stay together, and we got to a certain spot and it got really rocky. And one of the ladies had cut their hands on the rock and they were bleeding. There's blood all over the snow and there's low visibility. And one of the people said, "Okay, we're done." And it wasn't wrong because I think we were all on that line, but it was just who's calling it. Because I think sometimes we get caught up with we want to be successful. We want to be to the top. That's the only way it's successful. But success is actually walking out the same way you
Hmm.
walked in.
And Renee brings up that trip. That trip was actually after a trip that Renee did with me to the same mountain. And Renee was on the false summit of that mountain, and her and I had picked a turnaround point. And at one point going up, I went ahead. She was going slower on the up, and we had a meet-up spot. But she stopped. She was a kilometer from the summit, and that was a huge, hard call. But as a team, we'd said what we were going to do when we got up there, and what time we were going to go back, because we had river crossings, and people really underestimate the trouble you get into if you go down in a river at night. It's even close to dusk. It was what was it, October when we
Yeah,
were
it
in?
was, I think at the end of September is when we went.
Yeah, I mean the water was freezing at night. It was
Oh
cold,
yeah.
and I respected her. She could have said, no, we're going to take one more hour and I'm going to get the summit. And yeah, we might be back after dark, but what's the big deal? Like, we're not that far. But she didn't. She respected the fact that as a team, we made a time, and she ended up having to go back, right? Which is a big trek in there. So huge respect.
How are you crossing these rivers? Are you taking your shoes off, putting your flippies on and shorts, or are you going through with gaiters and hoping for the best, or
I
what's
walk
the
right
deal?
through. I grew up walking right through. My hiking boots or my trail runners are more secure. Unbuckle your pack so in case you get knocked over, because I have fallen in the river once and I thought I was going for a bath. Actually, it was the same trip that Tara and I went in. I hit a rock and it was really slimy with the moss and I slipped and I thought, going down the river, that's what's happening. And I look back and I think I was on my knees for like 10 minutes and it was waist deep. I don't think it was. I think it was a really short period of time because after we started going again and I kind of, got up and went, "Oh, that was scary." My next thought was, I'm going to have a wet sleeping bag. Note to self, next time line it with a garbage bag or something. And then when we got in, my sleeping bag was dry. So that tells me that the time I spent in the river might have seemed like an eternity, but sure wasn't. But I kind of lost track of time because it was like, "Oh no, I'm going down the river." And then it was like, you need to get up. You need to get up. Having that self-talk to focus. Because then I started getting up and then I was like, I think there's a lot of money in this pack. What's important to me? Right?
Hmm.
I don't want to
Yeah.
lose my stuff. I don't want to go for a swim. And that's why when we got to that mountain that day, I said to Tara, I am not crossing a river in the dark because I know how I felt in the light. And that was a really simple thing. But crossing in the dark was not on my list of things to do.
So are you often hiking with wet boots then? That's just part of the process for you, or
Well, for me it is, but
yeah.
I have like one type of runners and hikers I hike with. I can walk with wet feet. They dry really fast. I don't blister, knock on wood. So I don't have
Hmm.
any problems with that. And especially when you're crossing like 18 times, I can't be bothered changing my
Yeah.
shoes. I'll just
Yeah.
pack more. That's no big deal.
Yeah. How about you, Tara? Is that your same process or?
I hike in trail runners and I walk through everything. But I never used to. I used to be a hiking boot, take them off at every crossing, um and I actually used to look down on people who backpacked and hiked in runners. I was like, "What are you doing? Where's your ankle support? That's not
Yeah.
proper." And uh they work for my feet better. I don't blister in them. I don't take them off because it doesn't bother me to walk with wet feet, but I do. What do I do? Yeah, I guess sometimes I don't even bring an extra pair of shoes. I just kind of tough it out and get in my sleeping bag with dry socks. Um,
Hmm.
Well,
The only way
what's your
I'm
move,
it
surprised.
Scott?
saves a lot of time, right? Like I do a lot of big distance stays. So if I'm going out for anywhere from like 30 to 50K, every time I take my shoes off, that eats up a lot of time, right? So I think it depends what kind of hike you're doing. If I only have one river crossing, yeah, I might take my shoes off. But
Well, and the big thing is when the only time it becomes an issue is when you're hiking later in the fall and then you get up and your boots are frozen and you've got to stand in the water to put them on. That's the only time it's a problem.
Yeah.
Nasty.
every big like every big trip that I've done back there, I have always brought a secondary pair of shoes though. So
Mhm.
sometimes I'll bring two pairs of trail runners, or sometimes I'll bring hiking boots and trail runners. And it's a little bit of extra weight, but I do like having a backup and a switch, especially if it's a longer trip, right? Like getting your feet dry at the end of the day. And then also with the hiking boots, right? Having that extra stability if I've got a really heavy pack. You don't know if I'm gonna roll my ankle and I'm gonna need that. So I do pack it quite often. I just don't use it usually.
Yeah.
What's your move, Scott? Are you taking your boots off every time you cross the river?
Uh, it depends. To me, there's a difference between a creek and a river. If it's a lot of creek crossings, what I've done recently more is good gaiters with my leather boots, and I stay dry. I can rip through a creek pretty quick, and my feet are dry. If it's what I call a real river, and you're like thigh deep, and then I'm taking them off. And but then you want some sort of got those keen rafting shoes, like an
Yeah.
aqua sock with some grip, and those are nice. But as Renee was saying, if you're crossing 18 rivers, the amount of time to keep changing is insane. And in mountaineering, or time is money. Like, it's more important than money. You really have to sacrifice so much to make time, right? So I can see the value. I've certainly done the wet shoes. I would say that's where the trail runners are better than a heavy hiking boot. I think if you had a heavy hiking boot and it was sopping wet, that's a recipe for blisters. But trail runners do dry out a little better.
Yeah. I want to get into our podcast question of the week. That was thanks everyone too that sent in messages for this one. We got quite a few responses. This was that what is your most memorable mountain you have climbed? Spencer wrote in Corey Pass, Mount Corey. Cole wrote in saying Michelle Lakes. It's a pass on the Great Divide Trail near Nordegg, and it's got some stunning alpine lakes there. Jeff said Mount St. Helens. Beth wrote in Mount Hawk was one of the first solo summits after having kids. Felt so good to get back in the hiking game. Renee, you mentioned Mount Russell. Can you tell us the story of that mountain?
No, there was lots of errors. Um, at the time that I went and did it, it was quite a few years ago, and I didn't have anybody to go with me. So I had actually approached one of the outfitters and said, "Hey, I want to go out there. Can you kind of be my base camp?" And he's like, "Nope, you need to jump on a horse and come with us, the liability part." And what was interesting about that is I didn't go the route of the book. I wanted to go my own way. I wanted to do something different. And partly because the route out there, I knew it and it was nice. And then turning off, I would just be walking in the bush. So I jumped on a horse and I jumped on a Greenbroke horse. And I don't know if you know much about horses, but I am not a horseback rider extraordinaire. And a Greenbroke horse is a little bit more work. So we got in the yard. It was actually a hunting camp, hunting party that was going out. And there was lots of people. So the first group went out because they were going to have us go in two sets. And sometimes the horses get anxious when some of the other horses go out. So I was back with this Greenbroke horse. I probably shouldn't have been on. And she started to rock her a bit. And I got it underhand and that was good. She started again. It was okay. She got near the electric fence. And I remember thinking, oh, I wonder if there's a good place to fall here. And then I was on my butt. I got bucked off and then I got up and, well, I fell, right? Like I was like, oh, that doesn't feel good. Well, I asked for another horse, got on the horse, went out there, climbed my mountain and well, you could read about it in my bathroom reader. But I did climb my mountain, but my back was broken two places.
Wow.
So I ended up falling in the
Holy.
one point, getting caught in a rock slide. We rode horses back in the dark, and I'd never done that, but I kind of fibbed and said I was fine with that. Yeah, it was an epic adventure that it worked out really well, but it was a really interesting time where mind over matter took over. I wanted that mountain. I can see that mountain when I wash my dishes. I can look at that mountain. And I was done waiting for that mountain. I had tried two other times with two other groups, and we turned back because it wasn't a good idea. And this time I was going to go to that peak. And I attribute that partly because I was determined to do it, partly because I was much younger, and really focused on the actual summit and the completion of that. And I did it for myself, and that was really important to me. So, I mean, when I look at some of these experiences we have in stories like Tara talks about, people getting caught and not being prepared, I get it because I've done it.
Yeah.
And all I can say is you get better,
Yeah.
get much better.
Wow.
Wow.
Terra, you mentioned Mount Massive, Colorado.
Yeah,
What's that story?
I think I was 21, and my friend Anthony and I jumped in a car and went on our first road trip, parent free, down to visit a friend in Colorado and go hiking. And yeah, we had a blast going down. And one of the hikes that the friend took me on was Mount Massive, which I think gonna 14,400-meter elevation or something is what it's at, I think. And it was really cool. I'd never been on something that was so high that I could feel kind of the breath being taken a little bit because I was living at sea level at the time. And it was just a really neat experience. So that was probably the biggest peak I'd done and the only peak in Colorado and alone and off from the parents. So yeah, it was a pretty memorable trip.
Yeah. Scott, anything come to mind when you're thinking like favorite peaks you've accomplished or favorite mountains, most memorables?
Oh man, I thought you might ask me, and I'm having a hard time with that. I grew up on the border of Switzerland, so I climbed stuff in Switzerland as a teenager. Lots of great memories there. I haven't done any of the passport to the peaks because I typically go into Jasper or south down Highway 40 into Whitehorse Wildland. So I've done lots of peaks in both of those places. They're all special in different ways. Like we got our kids climbing when they were very young. I think we did Morrow Peak, which is a small mountain, and our twin boys, we have six kids, right? So the twins were only five, made it to the top of that mountain. And then I think we did Roche Mayette, and the twins were seven. So six kids up to the
Wow.
top of Roche Mayette, sitting on the nose of that, the chief, which is actually the painting behind me. But yeah, so many memories. Roche Perdrix, right at the park gates. So it doesn't sound like much, but I think for me it was a big trad multi-pitched climb. So placing trad gear, and my wife was belaying, and just the exposure of being, a kilometer in the sky with nothing under your feet and your heart's racing and the self-doubt sets in, and you conquer it and you feel like king of the world. So there's so many different stories. Pyramid Mountain, Wilcox. My son and I got off route, and that was scary. I look back and I still shake my head and I'm sure you guys have those stories too, where you look back and think, here, but for the grace of God go I, like something could have gone really bad. And sometimes it's something little. You don't know if a chunk of moss will peel out when you're scrambling, or there's water, or you hit scree, or, you know, we all have those experiences, right?
Yeah. I was talking with the wife trying to figure out because we've done a few mountains, but I haven't done any of the Passport to the Peaks yet either. But this year I'm planning to tackle a few of these bronzes. But yeah, you mentioned Whitehorse Wildland. It was a few years ago on our anniversary, went up the Leland Basin, the mountain in there. And
Yep.
it was a real memorable hike for us. It was just like a day hike that it wasn't like a real extreme grade or anything. But I had my old dog Tyler with us, and he was like, I think he was 10 or 11. So he was like slowing down, but he got to the top of the mountain, and like just the wind blowing through, like his ears were flapping, and you could just like, he was king of the world. And it was just like, it was a magical moment for us. And when I just think about mountains that we've been on top, I was like, oh, that was amazing. So, yeah, thanks to everyone that sent in messages for that one. And yeah, you can read some more of those throughout our social media posts. Passport to the Peaks, you can find them on Instagram. Um, Grande Cache Tourism, that's like the visitor center. There's the best spot, the only spot, I guess, to get the actual book. So if you get the book, each one of these 21 peaks has like, is it a stamp up there, or how do you signify that you do? Do you just get a picture with it, or how does that work?
So the program's evolved in that manner. In the beginning, when it started, there was a stamp at every box. And what happens when something stays out there for a long time in extreme weather is it deteriorates. Part of the problem is cost of replacement. Some of the mountains that are accessible by quad, people sometimes take the stamps, like we've had, vandalism and damage. And then the other thing is some of them are remote and it's just not as easy as whipping out there and changing them. So
Yeah.
what we've done in the last few years is we've got another set and we have them at the tourist center. Plus, as the program's involved, our group, our Passport to the Peaks group, there's more people posting pictures of their accomplishments. So before that wasn't a thing because we didn't have cell phones with pictures. It was still back to the old camera and film. So now that there's pictures, people can post pictures of themselves doing these things. So it's a record. So take the picture at the peak, go into the visitor center, and they can stamp it there because we have a nice set of stamps at work and it's preserved and there's no, pieces broken and stuff. And then that way you can get your record and then you have your nice photo as well. So that's kind of how, our digital era has kind of changed our program.
So each peak also has instructions with bearings in it because, as we said, once you get into some of the silvers and the golds, you are doing compass work, and you really should know how to use your compass even if you're navigating with something else, because sometimes those bearings are honestly the most direct way just to get to where you want to go. Karen, for instance, the bearings are great. You use your compass on that one, you're gonna pop out exactly where you're supposed to. So you get a map that you can navigate off, and you get step-by-step instructions for one route that you can do to access that mountain. And as I said, you should really take what's given in the book and you should expand on it with gathering your own knowledge and deciding, okay, based on what other people are saying about this route, is this something I want to do, or do I want to create my own route, or do I want to do a route that somebody else has posted about and research that? So you get everything that you need to get to that mountain, and you get a little map and the information, but from there you can expand.
Tara, are you thinking this year will be the year you'll tackle the next three, or what's your timeline on something like this? I mean, I know you're doing a bunch of, like, you're doing like the death race this year, and I see like yeah, you're busy.
I have overloaded my plate to extents I can't even talk about on here. I think I have 4 races. I've got one big backpacking trip that's going up mountains that I've already been up, so that's not gonna. There's 2 of them that I can do pretty quickly. So I make the guess that I will have one left at the end of the summer,
Okay.
unless we get a really nice fall, and then it's possible I get the program done.
Yeah. And Renee, like, since you finished the 21 now, what's your plan? Are you gonna do you have like a favorite you're gonna go back to, or what's the plan this summer?
There's a few people who want to join me in a few hikes and I'll probably go with them, but I've really not explored the Rock Lake area.
Okay.
So I've got a goal there. There's a few hikes I want to do and check that out because I heard the views are totally different. And I'm looking forward to maybe going on a hike that's not riddled with trees that scrape your face till they bleed and,
Yeah.
some of those things because some of our bush here is really thick. It's really different. So I've heard lots of great things actually from Tara. And I follow her Wilmore Wilderness page, hiking page on Facebook. So it's time for me to explore a different area. But I mean, like a great place to go for lunch is Stern on that side hill, the south of Stern. So there's a few places I like just to go take the dog and walk up and sit, and that will never change.
Scott, you adding
So
a couple of these mountains to your list?
yeah, there's so many, like as I'm hearing you, I'm thinking, man, I need 2 lifetimes to explore everything up here, right? The Northern Rockies are just incredible. I did want to ask you about bears because we are in prime grizzly country, mountain lions, black bears, of course. You must have some good stories because you're off the beaten track. You're right in their backyard. They're not expecting you. Do you guys have something good to share?
I have nothing. I think I've had 2 bears that I've seen in the last 15 years. One was probably the end of October, and it was right in town when I was walking the dog, and only because the dog chased the bear. And it was like, what are you doing, kiddo? So that was exciting, and that was nothing. And then the other one is when I was running, I was doing lots of ultra marathons, and I was coming down Hamel, and we saw these runners, and they said, "There's a grizzly bear." And my girlfriend said, "I don't care. There's a rock in my shoe." So we stopped. She changed shoes, and she was really loud, and that was kind of the end of what we saw of bears. So honestly, I usually go in a group, and we're usually visiting. We're social, and we're making noise. We're also respectful of where we are and what we're doing. We're hanging our food. We're doing all the right things. But I've never seen anything but sign.
Hmm,
I
that's
had
good.
an encounter hiking in the Wilmore when I was 11. I was up ahead of a group and I was being really quiet, and I ran into a mother grizzly with three cubs, and that was a bit exciting. It all turned out well. She stood up and kind of looked at me, and the group caught up, and we set a banger off, and she took off. Uh, Other than that, I do hike a lot alone, and I do hike in smaller groups, but I make a lot of noise. I'm constantly making noise, and some people might find that they don't like it. They like to hike quietly, but especially when I'm alone, I'm loud. I'm really loud, and I don't see bears. I see lots of tracks that are extremely fresh. I can tell sometimes I've hit poop that's steaming. Like I've obviously scared the bear. Like multiple times this has happened. I've obviously scared the bear off of the trail ahead of me, but there wasn't an encounter because that bear knew I was coming. And for the most part back there, they're not habituated. I did have one. I was coming out. I had been backpacking in Seep Creek in the Wilmore, and I was hiking out the road. And I think it was. It might have been May. It was really early, and so nobody was camping back there. There was one car that had driven past me, and a bear crossed the road in front of me and my dogs, and kind of went into the bush. And I thought at first it was a little grizzly because of the coloring of it. It was kind of that tan, and it wasn't. It was a blonde black bear. But the I set off my air horn, and the car came up. I said, "Hey, just hit your horn, as you go through here." Because in my mind, I was like, "This bear is going to take off." I should have walked beside the car. Well, I go forward with my dog. That bear was like 15 feet off the trail. It was just standing there, watching
Hmm.
me. I was like, "Oh my gosh." And so I back up. I had my spray, of course, ready, and I had the clip out. I had my nail under it. I was like, oh no, right? Like this bear is right here. And I said, well, what do I do, right? If this bear doesn't move and I've got to get down this road, I was like, should I go way off in the bush? But then if this bear is going to come in, then I'm off in the trees in trouble. And I ended up waiting a bit, and then I just faced the bear and I went through, and that bear did not move. It just stood there like I think it stood there like 15 meters off the trail. It was like one of the most terrifying things. I was like, well, I gotta go home. Like I would be here forever. But that bear just watched me, and I think it was habituated, honestly. The campground was
Hmm.
really close, and I haven't ever had that kind of issue in the Wilmore. I think they might come into a camp and scavenge food if there's anything around when people leave, but nothing like that where the bears aren't a little bit afraid. And that being said, I actually don't camp in any of the big camps back there. If I do use them, I put my tent a good 150 to 200 meters outside of them because there's a lot of smells in those camps. And the way that I keep myself safe is I treat the whole camp as part of the food triangle. If you do Parks Canada, they say you hang your food, you have your cooking, and you have your sleeping area. I think it's 100 meters. Most people say, well, I treat the whole camp because I don't know who's been using it. And I know how some people cook and they do their dishwater. I treat the whole area as a food zone. I hang my food somewhere, and then I get my tent way the heck out of there. And I sleep well at night.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think that's a really good point because sometimes in those camps, there's horse camps, and the horse people do things different than the hikers do. Like the first time I went with my daughter and one of her friends, because they have horses, and we went in the three of us, they left everything in their tack boxes in the camp. And I was like, why aren't we hanging stuff? And they said, well, with the horses, we're not going to have any problems. And we didn't, but it was different than what I was used to. And it was kind of uncomfortable. So, whether they're putting, I don't know, bacon grease in the fire and leaving it in the camp, or, because they can also pack different things.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I always think about there's the bears you see, and then there's the bears you don't see. And if we could know, how many times we passed by something that just stepped off the trail. I mean, Tara, you talked about the one that stepped off. My guess is that would have happened many times to us that we've never known, right? And mountain lions too. And I know this because I know people have collared mountain lions and said they've been seen crouched by hiking trails just right behind junipers and things, willows, and people are just clueless to what's actually going on. But it sounds like you guys are doing the right things, or you would have worse tales to tell for sure.
Um, I think, well, I guess we should bring up too, Renee, you mentioned the CBC is going to be doing a little bit of cover on this story too, hey?
Yeah, CBC sent me an email today and we had a conversation and they're interested in learning some more about the Passport to the Peaks. They're looking, I think, at some tourism, stories kind of in Grande Cache. And I think Grande Cache is becoming a little more well known, a little bit more popular as, with some of the exposure out there and when people are realizing what we have to offer. I know it's a small town, so it's not necessarily on the map. The death race is the big one here, but I think Passport to the Peaks is really coming to the forefront. I've
Yeah.
noticed that if you look at jobs in Indeed in their coming Grand Cache area, they're now actually advertising Passport to the Peaks as part of the draw because it's such an amazing program.
Yeah, I picked up it's the Greenview visitor guide here the other day and I was just going through it today and it's like, yeah, Passport to the Peaks mentioned a couple times. I mean, I love it that you can get into Grand Cache and you're just surrounded by mountains and that's one thing like since I moved out to Hinton here and to the Northern Rockies, like I want to know the names of these mountains. So like to be living in Grand Cache, like, hey, I climbed that one, I climbed that, I climbed all 21 of these. I mean, that's a pretty cool thing to have on your list. So, Renee, you mentioned something too about your bathroom reader. What does that mean? Do you have a book that you wrote or something?
It's almost finished. I'm working on some, it's called Tales on Trails. So some of the different experience I've had and some of the things I've learned as I've went on. And the reason I call it a bathroom reader, because they're not going to be long stories. Hopefully they're a little bit cheeky. They'll probably tell you what not to do, somewhat entertaining, but it's just a little project I've been working on. So
Love
yeah.
it. Okay, let us know when that comes out because I want to check that out. Scott's got a book coming out. Scott, your book coming out this summer?
Hopefully this summer, certainly by the fall. Yeah. Right now, the working title is My Bushcraft Life. So, yeah, lots of near-death experiences in there. The whole thing is similar to the bathroom reader, short stories, short adventures with lessons learned the hard way. So, when you almost die, then you have a few takeaways, right?
Yeah.
Every time. Um, so, yeah, that's how I've learned most of my lessons the hard way.
Tara, we want to chat with you again this summer before the death race and see how that's coming along because I mean you're full on training. When is the death race? Is that August?
The first weekend in August.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gonna be
Yeah,
ready for it?
my friend, we were hiking up Grand, and she goes, "Tara, you should just do the Sinister Triple, which is 3 races, all 3 weeks apart." I don't know. I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like a great goal. Good idea. We'll train together. This will be fun, you know." It will be. Yeah, I think it will be a good journey and it will be a good test of limitations. And that's one really cool thing about living in Grand Cache. A lot of people don't know we have an incredible trail system. We have mountain biking trails. They get groomed in the winter. You can fat bike here all year round. And I guess some people don't want everybody to know that because they're so good. They like themselves. But not just the death race trails. We have just an intricate trail system that goes all over the place that includes some of the passport peaks, and it's a runner biker paradise. There's no better place to train and come up, and a lot of people are up here training all the time. So
Snowshoe, cross country skiing, like we really have a lot to offer.
you have a lot to offer, and yeah, it's a paradise. I live in paradise, so why not go for the races while I can, right?
It is. It's an amazing place. Tara, for people that are listening who aren't local to the Northern Rockies, give a quick snapshot of the length of the death race there.
Well, I think it's 114 kilometers or 100. No, Renee's shaking her head. How long is it, Renee?
It's 118 now. It started at 125, and over the period of time, it's actually shortened a little bit. So now it's 118.
Yeah.
And over a couple mountain
I
ranges or something.
believe it has 3 mountains in it, and then the single track trail in it is very technical, very rugged. You were working a lot. to complete it.
And you're crossing rivers as well,
There's one river, but they take you across in a boat, and they have
right?
the Grim Reaper is waiting there for his coin. So
You have to,
you have to make sure to pay the Reaper. You can't lose your coin, which you pick up on the top of the camel. So if you're really tired and out of it and you drop that coin, well, you're not going across the river,
wow.
which is cool.
Hey, it's serious because I know one year I tripped on Lake 5 and I dropped my coin and it was like hardcore. I got to find it because you're not finishing. They won't let you cross.
Wow. The
Yeah.
Grim Reaper is not going to take you off the river Styx without it, eh? Yeah.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for joining us on this episode, guys. I think this is such a cool thing to have right in the Northern Rockies, right next door, and I mean, to be able to start on some easy mountains and work your way up, that's super cool. Passport to the Peaks, you can find them on Instagram. You guys got a Facebook page going there too. And then if you want to get the book to get your stamps, go to the Grande Cache Visitor Center. And then, yeah, track down Terra on social media. She's always doing stuff. Scott, you can do at Northern Rockies Bushcraft. Find out what Scott's been up to. We got some interesting interviews coming up here too. We talked a bit about the Wilmore on this episode. Coming up in the near future, we're hoping to talk about trapping in the Wilmore. So that's going to be an exciting one here. So, yeah, anything else you guys wanted to add before we shut this down?
I was just going to say impressive stuff. I knew you were impressive ladies before this, but now you've even gone higher in my book. So I'm amazed that you've done all these peaks. So good on you.
It's funny. I follow you, Scott, because I'm always inspired by other parents, and I love seeing you out with your kids and your grandson, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. I have young kids right now, and one of the things that inspires me is families that are doing the passport program, moms doing it with their teenagers, and watching you. And I go, yes, I can do this too. I can get my kids out there, and I have all this stuff to look forward to. So, yeah, I really enjoy your stuff too. Keep doing it. It's
Well,
cool.
thanks. It's the good life, right? It
Yeah.
really is.
Wilderness Wavelength.